Uh, the,
I think we can start.
Hello. So one Weber. There is one more person from our team, Rita. Is she on the panel?
She's joined. She's joined here.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, she's here only. Just I had not given her any rights to share screen or other.
That's fine.
Good morning, everyone.
Okay. Yeah, so we are going live. Okay, be ready.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Checkup Web Magazine, I, Kellyanne, Marketing in Charge, would like to welcome you all today for our special webinar, Beyond Music, Finding the Hidden Notes. I know that many of you are busy, but I do appreciate you taking the time to join us on a Sunday morning. The team has been working to put together a webinar that will be enlightening and engaging, and I'm confident that you'll have a great time. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce Dr. Santosh Karmarkar, the Chief Editor and Director of the Checkup Web Magazine. Dr. Santosh is a pediatric surgeon and a senior consultant at Leelavati Hospital. Welcome, sir, and over to you.
Thank you, Kelly. At the outset, let me welcome all of you to this conversational mehfil. And before we get started, and as some more people are joining in, let me give you a brief idea about the Checkup magazine. The Checkup magazine was started by some of us in 2019, and it is India's first and only general lifestyle magazine, which has exclusive content exclusively written for doctors, of doctors, and by doctors. The editorial team and the regular writers team of the Checkup magazine, which comprises of about 25 creative, talented, budding writers, has a group of about 25 across all age groups. We have youngsters, medicos, and senior consultants on our team. I'll just briefly give you a glimpse of the kind of exclusive content that the magazine puts up. So we have many sections like featured, lifestyle, science, and here are some of the content that has been recently put up on the magazine. So in special featured articles, we have articles such as this one written by Dr. Sharad Iyengar, a pediatrician from Rajasthan, and by a practicing dentist from Kankauli, who writes about modern ICUs. We also have excellent lifestyle articles written by doctors from all over. Dr. Aruna Menon is a recently retired head of Department of Obstetrics from the AFMC, and she recently wrote an article about being a woman doctor in the armed forces. There are satires and anecdotes, and here is a young plastic surgeon who wrote an article called Roti to OT about how it's a struggle between the kitchen and the plastic surgery operation theater. We also have wonderful articles on science, which we will not generally find in our medical journals or newsletters of associations, such as, does aging need to be considered as a disease, or pet-assisted therapy? Next slide, Kelly. And we have business articles, we have excellent opinion pieces, we have a great list of books which are reviewed by our doctors, and these are books which generally you will not find in the mainstream print media being reviewed, but these are books which are related to health, related to medicine, and have been much acclaimed. Next. And of course, we have excellent reviews of medical documentaries. We have travel logs written by doctors. And another very popular feature of the magazine is the community post. And here was a community post which was liked by many, which spoke about what it means to be noble in our profession. And we had a group of senior eminent doctors across specialties writing about what it meant to them to be noble. So next, any more? So this was just to give you a glimpse of the kind of exclusive content that we put up in the magazine. As I said, we have anecdotes, we have trending pieces, we've had poetry written by doctors, we've done photo contests, and we regularly put out video interviews about the life stories of senior eminent doctors from across the country. So I urge all of you to have a look at this magazine. Do visit the website. And if you like it, please give us your free and frank feedback. In our doctors' orchestras and doctors' groups, Savita has won awards at the national level in light vocal music. Yogendra has also sung and participated in concerts. And apart from that, is an author as well. He wrote a widely read Marathi novel called Dr. Nawacha Manus, which was published by the eminent publisher Granthali. So we have a great pair who are going to be talking with Namita. And lastly, before handing over the proceedings to the Javdekars, let me just give you a fact which will give you an idea as to how greatly they love music. Both their son and daughter are named Alap and Arohi. So that tells you their great passion for music. So to the father and mother of Alap and Arohi, over to you for the exciting session.
Thank you, Dr. Santosh Karmakar, for all the flattery. Thank you, the Checkup team, for giving us this opportunity. We are privileged to share a screen with Namita Devidayal, who is a very senior journalist with the Times of India, has been the co-director of the Times Lit Fest. She is a celebrated author, has written 3 books. The first one, The Music Room, then Aftertaste, and The Sixth String of Vilayat Khan. She graduated at the prestigious Princeton University. Presently, she is in the process of writing a web series set in South Mumbai. Today, we are going to talk to her mainly about her 2 books, The Music Room and The Sixth String of Vilayat Khan. The first book, The Music Room, is about her guru, Bondutai Kulkarni, and her own relationship with her guru. The second is essentially a biography of the great musician and sitarist Vilayat Khan. So let us begin by asking her. A very typical South Bombay girl staying at Kambala Hill starts going to Bondutai Kulkarni to learn vocal Indian classical music. That's unusual. How did that happen? And how did you feel like writing about it?
Thank you so much for the introduction. I feel very humbled because you all are all such amazing senior doctors. And, you know, So I'll tell you, my family, especially my mother's family, comes from, a real lineage of patronizing the arts. So they are an unusual kind of family because both my mother and father are from business families. So hardcore, like I just watched this movie in which a parent named their child Tijori, because they believed that, money is the main thing, and how you all have named your children so beautifully after Indian classical music. So I come more from the Tijori kind of background, but luckily, both my parents were very artistically inclined. My mother comes from a family of great patrons of the arts. So I think it was just a very natural thing that even though you go to an English-speaking school, etc., you have to have an introduction to the arts. And so I was sent for Bharatnatyam, I was sent for music. I don't think that my parents had any inkling that a mere extracurricular activity, which is what they had in mind, would become such a kind of a subcurrent in my life forever. I think that just is destiny, and that's something which was a chemistry between Dhondutai and me, and my own inclination towards something beyond the music, which is what I'm going to try and talk about a little when we say hidden notes. It's a metaphor, right? So it's really about, I think I've always been seeking something that is beyond the sort of material transactional world that we all otherwise occupy. And because I've found myself at 55, I'm reflecting back, and most of my interests have kind of led me back into some very deep traditional spaces. So that was my introduction to Dhondutai, where, I was sent to learn from her. Now, as far as why I wrote the book, we'll have to fast forward from that time when I was 10 years old to when I was about 30, 35. And I was living in the United States, and I was not working. I had a small baby. I was going through a slightly difficult time in my personal life and trying to find some way of making sense. And so I took a course in writing. And in that course, the professor said that try and write what would be the first chapter of a novel. So it can be on anything. Now, I found myself very automatically and seamlessly writing in third person. Of course, it was a fictionalized, because the assignment was to write fiction, writing about a little girl who goes to learn from her music teacher. And, I was kind of astounded at how vivid the visual memory was of going into that little room in Kennedy Bridge at Congress House. And then all the little memories, because it just literally came out like malai, and so I wrote that first chapter, and it was about a little girl who I called Chintu. And then I remember, writing it, and it was left because this was just a work assignment I did it in this class. And thereafter, I remember I met, I had a friend who was a jazz musician. He was an African-American, and he would keep asking me questions about, what is a rag, and what is the sort of like, what is the basis of Indian classical music? Just a normal questions that you would ask to understand the basics of a whole art form, where you're interested, but you're not like, you don't want to learn, but you're interested in finding out more. So I then just had this thought that, I'm not working, I don't have that much going on. So why don't I try and write a book about Indian classical music? And as this friend of mine pointed out, I was both on the outside and in the inside, which is a very unique and privileged position to be in, actually, because it allows for objectivity. So a lot of people who are just enmeshed in that world, but don't have an outside perspective, or actually in any world, I would think, they get kind of caught up in it, and then you get caught in the politics of it, and you're not able to really see it with a slight humor, a slight objectivity, a slight distance, where you're able to even then take out some of the negative things in it, right? So it's hard to do that if you're just in it. So, sorry, because I was both outside and inside, I feel like I was in this position to write about it, almost like a person entering that world and taking you on that journey. And that's how I ended up writing about it, because it was, for me, it was more than the music, it was a whole universe. And very frankly, unless you have some access to it, it's a very closed world. I don't know whether that's done purposely or whether it's just the nature of that world. But, you know, most people don't have any idea. In fact, it's kind of a lot of artists, you know, like are very secretive about sharing techniques of voice and techniques of singing, including Dhondutai, because for them, that's their wealth. So it's like, why would you distribute, you know, it's something that you have, like any, you know, it's like if you're an expert in the share market, you're not going to just openly talk about what the hidden secrets are of how to. So it's the same idea, really. For her, it was that. And they felt very strongly about it. And I mean, I don't agree with that, but that's not my business. So I thought that it was a nice way for me to write about it as a person on the outside who would enter this world, then got caught into it. But it was not about me. It was, I was like the Sutradhar, you know, and I became the Sutradhar into this world. And then the more I actually started both turning to my own memory bank as well as researching it, I was like, wow, this is a great world. I'm going to write about these three great artists who are of a lineage. So that gave it a certain structure and chronology. But as you know from reading it, it had a lot of excursions and, you know, like little movements into parts of the highway. And it was, I really tried to braid together theory, experience, emotion, my own story, the story of Dhondutai, which is so poignant and lovely because it's really about a person who believed in just music unconditionally and her little gods. You know, it was, so for me, that was really something like a very unusual space to be in, where it's really not very interested in the randomness of what we call the real world, you know, and I think I was really drawn to that. So I stayed, and even long after I came back from college and long after I, as the book reveals, I kept going back to her, but it was not to learn music, it was for something more. So I think that's how this whole thing emerged. And I think accidentally it touched a chord. I mean, it just touched a chord, literally and otherwise, with a lot of people. Because I think everyone on some level is seeking that space that is beyond the, you know, robotic way that we all live.
Yes, I think the Javadekars had dropped out, but they are back in.
Okay.
Just the last 10 seconds, probably.
So
Yeah.
I guess, yeah. So that's how I did it. That's how the book happened. And I didn't think too much. In fact, it's a very interesting organic process for me, even as a writer, because I was living the story partly while writing it. So towards the end, we go to, I had come back from the States to India, and I went with Dhondutai to Kolhapur, which is where she's from and where she used to sing at the Mahalakshmi temple. And it was kind of like, I didn't know how the book was going to end. And it ended up with that whole space, like of going over there. It was like coming full circle, because that's where Aladia Khan used to sing. And it was a very powerful moment, even for me. I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
Okay.
Yogendra, please go on. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the book happened in an extremely organic fashion. And I think because the story itself is so powerful about these three musicians, it really ended up having a certain kind of potency in it. Yeah.
Yeah. You have written very nicely about Dhondutai's life. We think she is a great musician, a big stalwart, but at the end of the day, she was very lonely and the life was very difficult for her. So would you like to read out a passage from the book, just to the viewers to get an idea?
Yes, really, you know, this This is a passage about the first few, sometime in the beginning when I had gone to her. And so Dhondutai lived in a very, very simple, as a PG in a little flat where she just had one room out of the flat, and she shared the kitchen and the other facilities. And it was her and her mother. And so I'm going to read out this passage, which kind of reveals the difficulty of being an artist, really, I think. Dhondutai asked if I wanted tea, which I declined. As she started making it, she chattered on, and I stood next to her, leaning on the kitchen counter, listening. Making tea is a lesson in life, she said. You think that you've made the tea just because you've put the kettle on the pot and dumped tea leaves into it. But take a deeper look at what's going on. Actually, someone has grown the tea leaves, someone else has pruned them, some poor fellow put them into packages, someone has milked a cow, and another has pressed sugar cane to give you sugar. And it is thanks to the fire that you can boil your water. So what you have done is a small speck in the scheme of tea making. Never feel undue pride, for there is so much more unseen energy contributing to your so-called achievement. What do you say, Maushi? You are quite right, Tai. It is all in God's hands, said Maushi with a sigh, dabbing with the end of her sari the film of sweat misting her face from the steamy tea. Maushi, by the way, was the person who was her landlady. Dhondutai laughed and poured the hot tea into 2 slightly chipped china cups and brought them into her room for her mother and herself. I picked up the cup with a quivering hand and spilled most of the tea onto the ground. She looked up at us like a sheepish child. Why can't you be a little more careful, Ai? Scolded Dhondutai. How do you expect me to keep cleaning up after you? Here, give me that cup. She shook her head and sighed. You didn't get burned, did you? Her voice softened, and she went out to get a cloth. Maushi walked in from the kitchen and gave Ai a don't worry smile. Ai was looking at the floor. She slowly lay back on her bed and turned her face to the wall. It was a very touching scene. 3 women in this tiny apartment, each with her own struggles and stories, supporting each other with empathy. One's face spoke of unhappiness, a husband who must have died in debt, leaving her a dark, peeling flat, half of which she had to rent out to keep from going hungry. The second had to cope with the shame of watching her body gradually detach itself from her mind. And the third was living with the pressure of knowing that she was born to deliver a creative gift to the world and that her mission had not been accomplished. For there were always medicines to buy and dinner to be made. Life was a constant struggle between mundane chores and her unworldly art.
Super, super.
Very nice.
Very
nice.
nice.
You have also written about Alaria Khan Sahib and his family, who were the court musicians at Kolhapur, and the founder of the Jaipur Gharana of course, and then about Kesar Bhai in your first book. You have written a lot about the court musicians and the court.
In the same house that Kesar Bhai used to live. And, you know, when I went to meet her, there was no trace of music in that home. And so I sort of started asking her, you know, about Kesar Bhai and about music. And I found that there was a kind of a shield whenever music was talked about. And she was really interesting. So she had been a doctor in her time. And she was very clear that her mother kept her completely away from her music. So to me, that was a very extraordinary kind of a paradox, right? Because here was Kesar Bhai, who was this great diva of her time, and her daughter had no real connect to the music. And every time I'd ask her some little, I said, I would try to nudge a little story out of her. She said something actually very beautiful. She said that I can't remember much. It's one of the few benefits of old age, which I found so powerful because it's so counterintuitive to all of us who are constantly trying to save our memories and remember everything, which is not even relevant in many ways. So so the fact that her mother had kept her so clearly away from this world was a real sign that, the world that she was participating in was a kind of she was respected while she was on stage, and then it was complete disrespect outside of that. It's really awful, actually, because it really sort of was all about the patriarchy of that time and all the hypocrisy. And even the fact that Dhondutai was sent to learn from her was not exactly the most common thing that was done with Maharashtrian middle-class Brahmin girls, because it was considered, so every time she went, someone would escort her. It was as if she was going into a dark space, which is so ironic, right? Because she was actually going into a temple of music on some level, so this kind of paradox. And then, of course, the strange fact that Kesarbai's own family, who had sort of grown into accomplished, people in business, etc., they never acknowledged that they had this great singer in their family. It's like being born into a family of, some Maria Callas or some equivalent thereof, and not acknowledging it. And it's because there was a deep shame over the Devdasi factor. So this is so as a girl, so for me, this book was also about kind of exploring parts of our own history and music history, which no one dares to write about because, I guess people are just a little bit shy, or I think they feel a sense of shame. They don't want to bring up these issues with, there's a whole kind of, thing about, of course, sexual issues when people are just pretend that they don't happen or whatever. But it's so, and then I was also finding out about my own great-grandfather, how he had a mistress. So this was clearly a kind of a parallel history, I think, that exists in India, which very few people have explored until recently. Now, of course, there's been books written about Tawaifs, etc. But otherwise, it was like all kept under the carpet. So Kesarbai was this extraordinary figure where she was this great, great singer. And because she was a Devdasi, there was this whole kind of prejudice, against her. And, if you actually extrapolate from this, I think it happens across the world because, I'm married to a blues musician, and he talks so much about the African-American tradition in the US, where these were people who were slaves. They were slaving away in the fields. Then but they were the greatest musicians. They would go to the church and sing gospel and create this great music, which then so many white people tried to kind of steal from, right? So these are things that we all need to talk about, I think, and bring out into the open and celebrate, which of course now happens, but it's just nice to do, and it's very recent in our history. So I felt quite strongly about it. And I extrapolated from that also that Kesarbai had a kind of a very volatile personality. And to me, what I read into it was, it's my interpretation really, but I felt that it was her anger. Because imagine being this great artist and, and then not being acknowledged, where you are there's a scene where she's asked to leave a wedding because of her caste. So it really moved me, and to see that, I would have been, today we take so much for granted in terms of all the rights we have as women, are allowed to do so much. But sometimes it's important to go back and see where we've come from, both in a musical history sense and as a woman. And so that's what Kesarbai was for me. So for me, it was also about bringing, and the sad thing is that Dhondutai got upset actually in the beginning that I was writing about these things. She's like, Kai, kashala hai sagra lela. What is the need? But I said, it's very important. You have to bring all this out and give her that respect and show the hypocrisy of those times.
Yes.
So I suppose I was also dealing with the generational thing, and even Kesarbai's family in the beginning was really upset. Then later they realized that this is the truth. The truth has to come out, really.
Yes.
So
Yes. As opposed to this book, where it's Dhundutai's and Kesarbai's life, Vilayat Khan was a totally different person, right? He came from a family of generations of musicians, very celebrated person, and it's a totally contrasting book. How did you come about writing Sixth String of Vilayat Khan? And tell us about something about that book as well.
yeah. So I did not expect the music room to go and become such a beloved book. People really, I think it touched a chord for people, which was, I think it brought out certain emotions in a lot of readers. And so it became really, celebrated. And Vilayat Khan's son, Hidayat, who's a friend of mine, kept saying, everybody knows Vilayat Khan as a musician, but very few people know him as a person.
Yes.
And of course, also, I think in that whole sort of rivalry between Ravi Shankar and Vilayat Khan had got a bit eclipsed for a variety of reasons, So not too many people knew who this incredibly great artist is. And Hidayat said that, I cannot tell you how beyond his music, his whole life was so, every little detail of his life has either humor or some flamboyance or something amazing about it, which I would love you to write about and share. And I kept saying, nay, I don't understand sitar, and I'm not really a music writer, which now, unfortunately, unfortunately, but I seem to have become that's my persona. But it's not like I'm that interested in Indian classical music that I will write another book about Indian classical. So I kept telling him, nahi, that. And he's like, just do it. And so out of sheer whatever, I started researching Vilayat Khan's life. And I promise you, within a few weeks of my first interviews with people, I almost had a crush on him. It was because he was just so incredibly sort of fascinating as a man, as a musician. And, he was a ballroom dancer. He was a great cook. He used to love fast cars. He drove a Mercedes from Kabul in Afghanistan, which was presented to him by the King of Kabul, all the way to Bombay. And through Pakistan and through Amritsar and to Bombay, and then he just drove around and had a party for it. So this man, I was thinking, he's like a rock star. You know how we look at rock stars in the West and say, oh my God, he's so cool, and there's all this stuff about him, and everybody sort of looks at them in that way. And then I really thought about how we needed to bring alive these characters in our own kind of milieu, but write it in a way where we're not just saying great Indian classical musician and all, oh my God, my son and all would get so bored with all that kind of thing. I said, I'm going to write this book about a man who was a rock star, who was a great musician, break a lot of the silos that we all sort of create. And, just as you read a great biography about anyone, like a physicist, like a Feynman, or a businessman like Steve Jobs, you want to read about their lives, even if you're not a physicist or you're not a businessman, because you want to understand what makes that person tick. So I wrote this book really with that in mind, that here is a great man who thinks way out of the box. He can look at a sunset and talk about how that should be brought into music. He can look at, even while cooking, he would say things like, the time that you put the salt into the khana makes all the difference to the khana, and you should bring that subtlety into your music. Now, these are insights that can apply to anything in our lives, because I could see myself becoming more self-aware, more aware of every single thing in my life, just after researching him. So I wanted to bring all that alive, and that's how, you know, when I started, I realized that this man deserves to be written about. There's not much written about him. And that's why I embarked on that, you know, and I hope that a lot of people get inspired by that kind of thing.
Yes.
You have actually written about Vilayat Khan transcribing aesthetics into music from whatever he saw. So talk something about it, please.
So I'll read out this passage about how he is sitting with his son, Shujat. So, you know, as I've mentioned in the book, these artists also had very difficult personal lives. I mean, I shouldn't say artists have difficult personal lives. I think a lot of people have difficult personal lives, but I think it gets amplified in the case of some of these artists, right? And they're traveling so much, and, you know, they're sort of also very self-absorbed. Now, I was trying to be very non-judgmental about his life, because who am I to sort of sit over there and say, well, he should have been a better dad or a better husband or whatever. That's who he was. My job was merely to present him in all his many colors, right? So one of the colors that I found, now he had a very difficult relationship with his sons, especially with Shujat, who was his older son, who was actually a very, very fine sitar player himself. And so there's this moment where he's sitting with him in their house in Shimla, and he talks about the intangibles of what you have to bring into your music, but he does it so beautifully. So I'm going to read out that passage.
Yeah, please.
As always happens within the darkness of family life, there were startling moments of light, like on that cold and rainy evening when the temperature suddenly dipped. Vilayat Khan had just returned from a trip to England and had brought back Cadbury's Bournville drinking chocolate. He was very excited to introduce his son to this delicious drink. He stirred up 2 steaming mugs in the kitchen and brought them out to the porch along with 2 quilts. He wrapped one around the boy and the other around himself, and they sat there in silence, holding their mugs. It was freezing. In front of them was the dark silhouette of pine trees fringing the hills. Beta, you know this feeling you are experiencing right now? This whole picture of us sitting here, the inky trees all around us, the sky a lighter shade of black, the cold you are feeling outside, the warmth and comfort you feel inside. This utterly gorgeous moment. You have to learn to transcribe all these feelings and this beauty into your music. It is not about the notes, but what goes on behind those notes. This is why a musician's son will always be different from one who comes to learn music. These are things that cannot be taught. They have to be experienced. Every experience must translate into your music. That's all there is for you to remember. You, my firstborn, will play like a king one day. When Shujat was a little older, he and his father were driving from Bombay to Shimla. They sped through the night and just as dawn was breaking, entered the state of Rajasthan. Vilayat stopped and got out to have a cigarette. Then he said in a soft undertone, as if not to disturb the rising sun, Shujat, beta, look. An orange and gold sun was emerging in the distance, and they could hear soft singing. A group of village women in bright colors were walking towards the well to wash and bathe and fill their vessels. If we stand here for another half hour or so, you'll see them come back, and they'll be swaying differently. They will look different. The way they look when they are coming back, that is the picture you have to translate into your music. There is a deep relationship between color and sound and beauty. They feed one another, they create harmony. Many years later, the warm afterglow of these moments with his father would float into Shujat's dreams and into his music.
Wow.
It was great.
Amazing. Amazing. You have brought it really nicely.
Thanks. And there's another beautiful story that his other son Hidayat shared with me, which was it was about how they were sitting together, and there was this beautiful Persian carpet, because everything in Vilayat Khan's life had a kind of incredible beauty in it. He really believed in how aesthetic has to kind of pervade even the smallest things in your life. And there are many examples that he has of that come up. Like he would literally cut his own kurtas a certain way. He would go and choose the material and then sit with the tailor and decide ki acha aise button lagayenge, and just do it in a very sort of like slow and shauqeen way, right? So there's this beautiful time where he sits with Hidayat and he says that there's this Persian carpet, and if you brush it a certain way, it looks monotone. I mean, it looks consistent throughout. If you brush it the other way, you can see that halfway there is a slight change in the way it looks. And he says that's because at that point, the father weaver had passed away and the son had taken over. So he said that if you really pay attention, you can see that subtle difference. And he says that's the kind of subtlety you have to bring into your music. Now, that's an extraordinary kind of like, even, using a carpet to describe how you have to be so micro nuanced in your music and pay attention to that level is so beautiful. So I'm sure like every conversation around him had that kind of aesthetic, gorgeousness and that ability to connect the dots, again, without creating these silos, which we all otherwise do. And so I found that, for me, it was such a great, enriching experience to just enter this man's life and learn about how he thinks.
You have written that he wanted everything pre-rehearsed and everything precisely rehearsed. Even the walk up to his stage, he would rehearse it. Okay,
Yes.
So everything was planned. On the other hand, when we listen to him, it's as if he's the most spontaneous of all the classical players that we have heard. So how is that so, and what would you say about that?
So that whole thing is this kind of, and I think this applies again in so many different areas of our life, which is that his whole belief, and it was that you have to really put in the rigor to master the technique so that it kind of enters your subconscious and becomes sort of spontaneously available to you at your requirement, right? So if I were to think of like, say, cycling at a very simple level, once you learn cycling, it's there and you can cycle at any point in your life, right? And it's the same with language. So he believed, and I think a lot of artists do, that when you put in that kind of riyaz at an early age, and that means seriously like fingers getting bloody kind of riyaz, where you're just doing the paltas up and down, and you're doing the sort of, then you've mastered it, where it enters your muscles and your nerves, and you're kind of then able to use your imagination, and you have this at your beck and call. So it's a very important insight, because we do live again in an age of like quick fix solutions, that 2-minute noodle and that, jaldi se stage pe pahunch jao kind of era. And it's a bit sad, because you actually have to understand that you can only really get to a point once you have done the work. So it's this play of conscious mind and subconscious mind, which is very interesting to me. And I think that we have lost touch with that idea in many ways, because I mean, any psychologist would tell you that most of what you do operates from an unconscious or subconscious space. So in a musical space, that's very interesting, because it enables flying, but not without that other part taken care of, right? So I think that's how he was able to be so imaginative and also so lyrical, and then really tinker around with both the instrument and the playing to do all kinds of things, which he had the confidence to do because he had got the basics sorted. So I really find that then he did a lot of stuff with Hindi films, and you know, he never took a byline, means he never took credit, because there was always this sense of like, I that was a little beneath me kind of thing, except in Jalsaghar. He did the whole music for Satyajit Ray's Jalsaghar, which is very powerful background score. So he was able to play around a lot. But he really believed that the technique can never be compromised. And, you know, that was his whole thing with, so again, you know, I think this is applicable to any musician as well as to anyone studying anything.
Yes, yes. I would like to just tell all the viewers that they can also put in their questions in case in the chat box, and if time permits, we will allow them to ask them. Coming back to your first book, it's your parallel story as well, right? It's not just Dondotai's story or Kesarubai's story.
Yeah.
You had been to the US, you got married, you got child, and you had probably by that time decided that you want to become a journalist and not a hardcore musician or a singer. But then you kept on going to Dondotai once you came back. What made you do that?
So I think she had become like a third grandmother for me.
Okay.
You know, there was just so much love, and it was just so it was so special for me, because again, it took me away from my otherwise kind of competitive, you know, success oriented life into a space where I felt like I was going back in time. It was a little timeless. There was such a simplicity. Of course, she made amazing khanas for the Varan Bhat and all. It was also a draw, I have to confess. And I would just go and spend time with her. And I can't really explain why. I really don't even know myself. You know, I came back from college in the States, and I actually spent a full year trying to be an Indian classical, you know, like full time, seriously. And then I realized that I didn't have the stamina or the tenacity or the guts to do something where you don't have a sort of a goal at the end, which is going to be in your hands. It's not in your hands. It's not like having a job where you have a salary or you have a certain kind of, you know, and also, you know, I think a lot of people were, in my world, were just like, what are you doing? Because it was so different.
Yes.
And really, like, kind of out of the way. So I think I just stayed in touch with her. I would accompany her every once in a while behind her in programs, etc. And I just wanted a part of that world. I cannot explain it exactly. You know, it's like these are things that are very very internal. You know, there's something which is, you just go to a person, you're attracted to a person or a space or a kind of thinking. There was a lot of love, a lot of simplicity. And I felt like I was just at peace over there when I would go to Borivali. I really did.
Yeah. You even went with her to Kolhapur.
Yeah.
And in the temple. How was that experience?
It was very extraordinary. I feel very blessed, you know, because that was that, as I mentioned in the book, it was the same spot where Aladia Khan used to sing for the Shahu Maharaj. So there's a whole kind of resonant history over there, you know, to sing at that spot, which has, I mean, there's, you know, I believe in vibrations. I believe that places have vibrational history and carry it with them. And so to sit there with Dhondutai, and we sang this beautiful bandish. I remember that. And it wasn't like there was some audience or anything. She just wanted to sing in front of the goddess. And I was there pottering behind her. Then we went to Baba's home, which was Aladia Khan's old home. So it was all like kind of entering a little, you know, history, Amar Chitra Katha of music or something. Like,
In fact, you have been to Kolhapur, have visited Aladia Khan's family.
yeah,
You have visited Kesarbai's family after
yeah.
she was no more. You have written a lot about the changing patronage of music, the changing the social configuration of music, etc. Tell us something about that. It's very fascinating, and no one has ever touched this subject at all anywhere. So
Yeah,
please.
even Muslim musicians, I mean, they being actually Hindus in the that's what it comes along in the history of music. Yes.
Everyone claims to go back to Haridas Swami. Every single
Oh.
musician. It's like a bit of a joke, actually. So, see, now the thing is that we tend to romanticize music and that world and all. And I know I've even done that in the book a little bit. But the fact is that it was, for many people, it was a profession, right? Obviously. So, even, so let me explain this. Like, when we talk about the good old days and all that, I mean, it was as cutthroat and because the human condition doesn't change, right? It's just the context that changes and the sort of particularities. But otherwise, everybody's just trying to get ahead, get on, sort of. So how were gharanas created, for example? They were not some stylistic, expressions, merely that. They were, at that time, there was courtly patronage, right? So the courts were also, I guess, the equivalent of today's, corporates or something. They were the ones who were providing the artists' livelihoods. So each artist had to come up with something that was unique about them, which would make the court want to get that artist and not the other artist. So that is really how the gharana kind of came into being. So it's very interesting how patronage has influenced so much of our music. And I wanted to kind of like bring all that out is both in both books. Because for me, in the Vilayat Khan book, what I found the most interesting thing was how All India Radio, which was the big patron and purveyor of music at one time. So let me put this in context. Can you imagine a world where a South Indian, an artist from Mysore would never have been able to even know what a thumri from Banaras sounded like? Because in those days, unless you had traveled to a place before gramophones and before any kind of recorded music, it was literally like not available to anyone, right? There was no access. We take it for granted. And I was just like, wow, imagine that, today I can just like go onto YouTube and listen to any kind of genre of music or any, anything that I want. And in those days, it was not available. And that's only 100 years ago. So I wanted to bring out the whole kind of dynamic of what was going on with how these artists learned from each other, how All India Radio became such an incredible patron, where all these artists would get together, meet, listen to each other, compete with each other, learn a few bandishes, steal a few bandishes, and it was like, that was the hub. And suddenly music was being made available to everyone. But of course, that also changed the way you presented music. So just as, you had gharanas were created by courtly patronage, the 3-minute music was created by the gramophone record, in which Kesarbai mastered the idea of bringing everything into 3 minutes.
Yes.
It's incredible because, it's like we believe that kheech ke, it's like some great concert and all. But imagine if you're able to bring in alap, tan, flourish, all the nuances of a rag in 3 minutes. I mean, if you listen to those 3-minute pieces, it's that. It's incredible. It's like literally a microcosm of the universe of, music. So how all these different patronage systems and technologies changed the music was as interesting as the artist live themselves, right? So it was like what I was trying to do in both books was to zoom in and then zoom out. So you created a backdrop of what was going on at that time. For example, even when amplification came in, that technology, it changed the way people sang. Like earlier on, a lot of people felt that Kesarbai used to really, she had learned the art of throwing her voice where that last person in the audience could hear her, right? So now it was not as necessary. Similarly, even Vilayat Khan, he played around with the instrument and the microphone to be able to create all kinds of new sounds, which then has now, of course, he's created the sitar standard, which others, it's like a whole new sort of lineage of, technology that he created through that sixth string and all that. So all this was very important. And then, of course, there was that whole period in India where, for some reason, there was just very little patronage. And so a lot of these artists moved abroad. And there was I've talked about that time when Ravi Shankar went, and then after that, Zakir Hussain and Vilayat Khan and Ali Akbar Khan. And so they were quite angry with the whole system over here and how government took over and politics took over and how one person would get a Padma Vibhushan even if it was not deserved, and all that was going on. And Vilayat Khan firmly believed that nobody has the right to decide who is a better musician. So, and I believe that too. I feel like who can be the arbiters of such things? A musician's music can change from one concert to another. So it's not, that's the amazing thing about it, right? It's like, it's such a present moment thing. So I think that influenced a
Tell us
lot.
something about the globalization of the Indian music and the global music in general, which you have written a lot about.
So it was a very interesting time. I did a lot of research into, who were the first people that took this music abroad. So I think it was initially in Russia, there was all these like collaborative events taking place between India and Russia, and they had these cultural events. And so that was when I think Vilayat Khan went for the first time. To me, what was very interesting is that there was also Western jazz and all kinds of music from the West that was coming into India and influencing a lot of Hindi film music at the time, which, and I think these are all natural cross currents that happen, and it's not about West or East or whatever. It's just what happens at different times and how things emerge. And so Indian music, because of this politics of patronage and the less and less audiences, perhaps film music had something to do with that because it became more popular. So these artists were feeling a little bit sort of let down. And Ravi Shankar was the first, of course. He really was the ambassador of Indian classical music, went and took it to the West, taught in New York initially, and then participated in that great Bangladesh concert for Bangladesh victims, etc. The interesting thing is that there was this gentleman who I've written about called Lyle Wachowski, who's this man who lived in New York, ordinary fellow of Russian origin. Professionally had nothing to do with music. I'm not sure what he did. But he had in college been to a class where he'd listened to Ravi Shankar talk about Indian classical music, and it had stayed with him. So when he was older, some 20 years later, he suddenly decided that he loved Vilayat Khan's music. I think he heard it at one concert when there was some kind of a Vilayat Khan had come there to perform for Bloomingdale's or Macy's, I can't remember. Something was going on where they had an India theme. Vilayat Khan was invited to perform. This man heard him, fell in love with him, and then spent his savings to bring him there for 6 months and just recorded his best music in the best studios. I mean, that's just incredible. So music to me has just broken all boundaries, both within India and outside, in the world. Like, it's beautiful. It's just something that's so intangible and so, I think, yeah.
Vilayat Khan, you have written that he was more of a purist, while Ravi Shankar and other people had a lot of fusion kind of music. They created that kind of music. So tell us something about that. I mean, what was his Vilayat Khan's philosophy behind all this?
They had a lot of tussle between them. That's what you have mentioned.
Yeah, so they did. And I think that's normal in any profession with any kind of like, those who are on the top kind of thing. So I think if one were to really simplify it, Ravi Shankar was a kind of a collaborative artist who moved more laterally and was willing to experiment with many different kinds of genres and music. And I think one of the reasons is that right from a young age, he had traveled abroad with his elder brother, Uday Shankar. And so he had already been exposed at a very young age to the best theater and music in the West. And so he didn't have that diffidence, Vilayat Khan, I think, came from a much more traditional background where it was clearly a very conservative family and very much lineage based. And so that also did impact him. His whole worldview was very traditional in many ways. Plus, I think he just believed that this music was it had so much to offer within the music that there was no need to go outside. And, there's an example of how Yehudi Menuhin, not Yehudi Menuhin, I think it was another great violinist, I forget, who asked if he could play with him. And he said that, listen, your music is great, my music is great, let's leave it at that. You do your thing beautifully and I'll do mine. And really, let's have a meal together instead or something. So the idea was that he was more of a vertical artist, I think, and Ravi Shankar was more, moving this way. And it's not really fair to say which is better or worse or any of that because it's not relevant.
Exactly.
Absolutely. You have also talked about the democratization of music in India and Paluskar and Bhatkhande. Would you please elaborate on that? Tell us something about that.
So Paluskar and Bhatkhande are these incredible figures for music because they, for the first time, did two things. Bhatkhande actually sat down and notated the music, which had never been done before. I mean, so what that did was it made it, it's sort of like codified and made it available for a much wider audience of people to come and participate and learn. And I think it was Paluskar who started the schools of music, the Gandharva.
The Gandharva Mahavidyalaya, yes.
So these two things just kind of changed the whole nature in which music went from being a very closed, gharanedar, secretive, filled with like a sense of not sharing, into just being something that was widely open and available for so many more people to come and participate. Plus, a lot of the other things biases were going away. So, I think the associations of girls being associated with music and being bad and all that also were changing. So girls were learning. There was just a different kind of a thing. So, I mean, that really has been a huge contribution. So this, it's funny how we only know the artist who is like the famous artist, but so much has gone into A, the making of that artist, and B, the enabling of that artist to be out there. Who are all the unsung sort of like elements, it's like the making of tea kind of thing. There's these beautiful stories about like how Dhondutai's mama, who was an Ayurvedic practitioner, he actually gave Burji Khan a few more years of his life by really focusing and tending on, he was very ill, Burji Khan, just so that his niece could learn more from him. I mean, he would never even be a footnote in the history of either Dhondutai or the music, right? But he was such an important factor by enabling the guru to be available for more time. Similarly, Vilayat Khan, in his story, it was his mother. She was like what you call the tiger mom, today you call a tiger mom, which is the person who really like pushes the child and all that. She even at one point was feeding the nephew, like feeding his bad drug habit just so that he would come and teach her son after her husband died, because that's how you kind of like you gathered the music from the family. Yes. Crazy stuff, she was just incredible.
Yes.
Also a horrible person, I'm told. So, I mean, whatever, it comes with,
Yeah.
You have written a lot about the families of these musicians. Dhondutai, of course, her father, how he took her, all that was at that time not accepted by the society. And the way, as you said right now, Vilayat Khan's mother, how she made him learn music, etc., etc. So, would you tell us more about the families of the musicians, particularly maybe Vilayat Khan, his lineage and his everything about the family, I'd say.
Yeah, even Dondurai's father, it was quite extraordinary from a Brahmin girl to
Very
completely get
extraordinary.
devoted to music. She even decided not to get married and stay alone.
And it's incredible because he really did it. His wife was also not exactly supporting it, but in those days they couldn't say anything. And it's really incredible what he did, how much he sacrificed. They moved to Mumbai, they came and found the best gurus, and it's quite remarkable. In the case of Vilayat Khan, I think the most poignant thing for me was meeting his brother Imrat Khan sir, because they had been estranged for many years. And I think it was the can't have a lion and a tiger in the same room kind of situation. It was like they both had fragile and big egos. And and of course, an elder brother is not able to entirely accept when a younger brother starts coming up, right? So that often happens even in business families, etc., and in so many other areas. So here what happened is that what I found really beautiful was that under all that anger or hatred or whatever word you want to put or hurt, there was so much love, bottom line. And that's usually the case, right? Because otherwise you don't feel anything. So I was very keen to meet Imrat Khan because it was like I'd heard all these stories about how close they were, how Vilayat Khan was his guru, how they had grown up together with so much difficulty and yet kept that music alive. And suddenly there was this huge estrangement. So I actually tried to find him, and he had moved to St. Louis, Missouri in America many years ago. Was married there to an American woman. One of his students had a child, etc. But I just had to meet him. So I kept trying to call. And then, the minute they found out why I was calling, they would just put the phone down. Then finally, through one of his students, I was able to get through to him. I flew there. I went and met him. And it was the most moving time because he kept speaking about bhaiya, bhaiya, and and then he brought out certain memories, and he talked about this one concert that they did and this one recording that they did, which became a big iconic hit because it was, I think, the first time that instrumental music was given a kind of almost a libretto, a narrative. So Vilayat Khan's imagination was like at some other level. He used to just, like take off. And so he made up this amazing story about how Shah Jahan and Mumtaz Mahal come down from the, sky, and I mean, not sky, but from wherever they are, to see what he had created after she died, which is the Taj Mahal. And it's called A Night at the Taj. And, we listened to that music. I'm sitting with Imrat Khan, listening to that music, and he's kind of crying, telling me these stories. And it was just very beautiful for me because I feel like I closed a loop over there. Because whether or not they talk to each other was not as important as the fact that this is the first family of sitar. Whether you look at them, their various, Nishat Khan, Shahid Parvez, they're all from this family. But for whatever reason, they don't like mingle and talk to each other and mix and blah, blah. But they are a very, very important family in the sort of history of sitar, and they're continuing. There are the younger ones are continuing. And so I was almost trying through that book to bring them all together posthumously or something. I'm not sure, but I almost felt like I was in that family for that while and trying to sort of reconcile,
You have written also about things like, see, we in India are such a divided society.
religion-wise, caste-wise.
Yeah.
So many other factors are there. But you have written that music is something which brings us together, maybe even meditatively. So would you tell us something more about that?
Yeah. It goes beyond the notes, as we say.
Yeah.
That's the title.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I was very moved by this aspect. And again, it's because I was from the outside, which is that I don't think there would have been any other context where a Muslim court musician, a Devdasi singer, a Brahmin Maharashtrian, person, and a girl from a westernized South Bombay background would all come together so seamlessly. I honestly can't think of any other space where this could happen with so much joyousness and so much, in such a seamless way. Now, these are cases where literally, I'm telling you, like, Dhondutai would not even have a glass of water in Baba's house because of all the sort of social conditioning and the prejudices, right? But when any of these people came together musically, it was like making love. It was as kind of complete and fulfilling and beautiful as it gets. So I mean, to me, I think that these are things that just have to be brought out, because in the end, you can, mentally create constructs and divides and all that. But, there is a certain kind of abstraction of the music and many other arts and many other spaces where all these divides just go, finished. It's like you can't even if you want to, you're just in sync, literally, right? So on stage also, so many such examples of, artists where there's a kind of a synchronicity which is marvelous.
Yes.
And I think in our times, it's really sad that we're now just focusing on all the constructs which are all man-made, but music, I think, comes closest to a kind of a space of no props and no thought, and even no words, right? Because it's like the akar is that, it's an absolute abstraction.
Yes.
And so it's actually, I think, thought through that way. I think it actually has been, it comes closest to what we would call a meditative space for that reason, because there's no words. So it creates that transcendental moment, both for the performer or the artist and the listener, which is what we're all secretly looking for, right, in the end.
Right.
And so these are all things that I just really saw, and I saw it come alive. And of course, that's just one layer of it, but it's the most important layer in the end. But then there are all the other things and all the gadbad and the politics and the various other things that go on, which is just life.
Yeah, that's the feeling we got when we read both these books, that it is a biography. I mean, they are books on the face of it, they are biographies, but they are very much philosophical.
Yeah.
And as doctors, we feel that if we can transcend this to our patients or everyone in the society, it will such a beautiful life for everyone. If everyone should listen to the music with that perspective, even though they don't understand the ragas and anything, but then it's quite meditative.
And everyone who, understands music or likes music, Indian music particularly, should read your books. There is so much into it. The Guru Shishya Parampara, the music families, the changing patronage, the history of music, the changing social fabric of India, everything is there and written so well. They should read both your books.
Yes.
One thing for the organizers and the technical persons, we haven't been able to read the messages that have been
I can read them. Should I just see what's on there? And
yeah, if you can.
Are there any questions for you?
Are there any questions for you?
Quite a few. So Smita Pai is asking how is Indian music helpful to release stress therapy? That's one. Indian music has amazing hidden capabilities to make person fresh and improve concentration levels as well. But nowadays, the music is not that melodious as old musicians did that. Yeah. So let me try and answer both these to start with. As far as stress therapy, so I think that, you know, I remember once Shiv Kumar Sharma had talked about this, which is that it is a no-brainer that there are certain frequencies or certain kind of things that music offers, especially Indian classical music, but actually any kind of music which has that particular quality, which I think it's actually a frequency that it touches. And it's an experience that you feel after that. So certain Hindi film music will have it, certain Western classical music will have it. It's something to do with a particular kind of frequency it touches. There is no question that it will release stress. There is no question about that. I mean, I've always had this dream or fantasy that, you know, every school will play a little bit of music in the morning. It can be a rag, it can be a piece of Western classical music, and it doesn't have to be explained and all that. It's not necessary. It just has to kind of be ambient and available to absorb so that it has a certain impact, which is hard to exactly describe, but it's the same feeling that you get when you're in nature, for example. You know, it's like you don't know exactly what it is that makes you feel better when you see greenery. I'm sure there is a scientific explanation for it, but it's that. And so it's unfortunate that it's not being made available. And it doesn't have to be Indian classical. Like I said, I don't believe in all these boundaries and all these like labels and all that. It has to have a certain, someone has to curate it in a way where it has the appeal. Like, you know, there's a method of teaching called Suzuki in Japan, which basically uses music, just teaches children music so that they are stress-free. And it came about after the war. It was a way to like release stress after the war. So yes, the answer is, of course, it should be used, but in a thought out manner where it is done mindfully. I mean, there's a village in Ludhiana called Bheni Sahib, where every single child is taught music, no matter what their professional engagements are going to be, whether they're going to be a farmer or a plumber or whatever. It's a particular Sikh community. And that Guruji, who was very close to Vilayat Khan actually, he really believed that every child should learn music for some time. You know, it's like how you teach a child a certain, I don't know, like a shloka or how to boil an egg or whatever. There's cycling. There should be music. So I think it's that idea that it just makes you a better person. It allows you to work at a different level, and we do operate at so many levels, right? So this acknowledges that.
You written that about that sect.
Yeah.
That those who learn music would never hate anyone. That is what you have written. I mean, tell us about that philosophy. And see, that philosophy brought people from Vilayat Khan to that Guru and so many other people on the same stage, on the same platform. So tell us something about that.
Of course, there must be something to that. So he connected with this, you know, there's this, what are they called? The Namdhari Sikhs. It's a sort of a offshoot of the Sikh community. And yeah, so they actually have these gurus who are so connected to music that they would invite the best musicians, patronize them completely because they were a very wealthy community, and ask them to come and teach their little children, you know, the best of their music. So Vilayat Khan was their music guru. He was the equivalent of their musical guru. Like they had the spiritual guru and he was their musical guru, and he would keep going back there, and their love was just incredible. You know, and again, it's so random, right? And even people like Amjad Ali Khan, Rajan and Sajan Mishra, all these people went through this particular Guruji. I remember Rajan Mishra telling me that he was doing a internship as an MBA student in some company in Delhi, in DCM. And he this Guruji from this sect heard him and said, listen, whatever you're going to be earning from your next job after your internship, I will pay that and more, but you were going to come and teach here. And he says, that's how I became a musician.
Oh.
Imagine he would have otherwise been doing some babu job or something, whatever. So, you know, it's, these are really like, you know, things that just happen. You don't know where and how and whatever. It's like these movements are taking place to keep something going. And really this music is very alive. I don't think it's in any way kind of dying out or anything, which everyone is fearful about. So
that is what I wanted to ask you. I mean, what is the future of music and how it will bind us and keep us bound together?
I mean, it's fully there. Like Dhondutai has 3, 4, 5 students who, unlike me, just stuck it out, are professional. They're gorgeous young singers. They're performing regularly. And it's so beautiful to see them because they all have some part-time job here, there, earning, teaching. And it's not easy. But, you know, obviously there's enough in there that's keeping them going because they're not being dragged to it or anything. There's something far more that just carries on. And I think that's the point, that everything is not transactional. And the sooner you realize that in life, it's better, you know, but it's a very personal thing, right? And it's not something that you can really impose on anyone. So, you know, I just wish there was more love for this music in a more ambient way, where it's like, you know, like I'll give you an example. In the West, if you you may not even realize it, but those Tom and Jerry cartoons, you know, the Tom and Jerry cartoons, they actually, their background score is Western classical riffs. So what happens is, I don't know who came up with that, but the idea is that the child then automatically remembers those tunes and they stay in their memory, right? In their So I wish there was some method of creating that kind of thing, which earlier on radio had, when there was Prasar Bharati used to, like they used to every early in the morning, I remember as a child listening to some music.
Yes.
But I don't know that now it's a little gitch pitch everywhere, right? Like, I don't know where we're headed exactly, but I think it'll just come back or in some form or the other.
Yeah. There are some other questions.
Yeah. So,
there's a lot of appreciation for the conversation.
Yeah.
Many nice comments. Anuja says something beautiful going on here. And thank you, Namita ji, for such heartening conversation. And thank you, Dr. Yogendra and Dr. Savita too. So great comment. There's some wonderful, positive comments. Very, very inspiring.
Yeah, somebody's asking, where will the support for young musicians come going forward? Earlier on, it was the Maharajas and Nawabs, etc. No, I mean, you know, I think each young artist finds their own space for where they get their support. And I guess some of it comes from, you know, playing for commercial government. It's not easy, but I think everyone finds their way and they don't seem very unhappy. Like recently I met a young man who's teaching tabla to my son for the summer, and he's like, he has some finance job, but he still goes all the way to his Guruji. He's teaching. I mean, I think when you want to do something, you just find a way to do it, right? Like, and obviously it's not as easy, but it's the joy that you get from it is clearly compensating for what's not easy.
Even for some livelihood, there was a trend that we saw, you know, last wedding season, we attended some 4 or 5 weddings, and all of them had, at the reception, there was a live orchestra playing. I mean, 3 or 4 musicians, and they were playing impromptu, not just the recorded songs. I mean, they were playing some bit of classical, then classical. So it's there, it will stay.
It will stay, the truth stays, and this has something very powerful. Centuries it has stayed, means like, you know, where's the fear of it going? And
Very
even if it stays in other countries, which is also the case, because now there's so many people abroad who are learning, and Indians as well as non-Indians as well, so many these tablas and all are being exported. This harmonium maker has actually created a mini harmonium just for that reason.
Oh.
So it's there. Of course, it takes new forms and shapes and all that, but it's very much there. I think there's no
So
problem.
soon you will have something like a Berkeley Gharana or a Seattle Gharana or something like that.
You never know. So I get so many people asking me to speak to them in America. It's incredible. Young Indians and otherwise. So
great.
I just think that it's out there.
Yeah. So I must say, through these books, though you have not become a singer, professional singer, you have been proponent of Indian classical music, and you have been spreading it globally.
I
So
guess.
great job that you're doing, and I urge everyone to please buy her books.
Thank
and
you.
Them.
And I'm sure everyone will enjoy them.
Everyone will.
The ones who understand music also will enjoy them, and the ones who don't understand really the music, they will still enjoy the books.
And
Really very good.
and
really
they would aspire to become, at least calm sense of music.
Yeah, it's there. It's there for everyone, really. And these days, with technology, it's so widely available. You want to listen to one Kumar Gandharv, you just go online and it'll be available to you.
That's the beauty of it. Yes.
So,
or maybe you want to listen to Marwa, so you listen to a Marwa by, say, Amir Khan, to Hussain, then Vilayat Khan, and 10 Marwas of 10 different kinds.
Frankly, I had not heard much of Vilayat Khan live.
Once only we had attended.
Only after reading your book, we went back to YouTube and searched for all the videos that we had. And
absolutely. There's no question. So, I guess these are all movements. So, are there any more questions that are... Vishnu Digambar held public jalsas which were never heard of. Yes, that's not a question. I think that's it.
So should we give it back to Dr. Santosh Karmakar?
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Maybe any last comments from all of you before we wind up?
I think Namita should be the person.
Namita should have the last word. Yes.
So I guess all I can say, it's just very special to speak to a community of doctors. I wonder if in some little way, and I don't know what that would be, it would require a little bit of out of the box thinking, but one could bring the music into a space of healing, especially on the neurological level, etc. I wonder if that is possible, just suggest it. Obviously it cannot come in the way of actual medicine and all that, but I do believe that there is scope to look beyond.
In fact,
in the palliative areas, especially, and all that, it's
something called music therapy institute at Bandra, where Sitarist Shashank Katti teaches that course.
Oh, okay.
The 6-month certificate course, and anyone can go who is interested in music and learn about music. So they have different ragas like Darbari to soothe you down, and for people of insomnia, you just play the music Darbari rag for 20 minutes, and it would put them to sleep.
They have certain therapeutic applications of various ragas and various patterns which are there in various ragas, the pakkads or whatever. So they've used it that way, and they offer a course.
Our son had done that course, so it really helped him.
I must find out more. In fact, if you can share that, I'd be very grateful.
Yeah, we will. Yes.
So on that note, should we give it back to Dr. Santosh Karmakar?
Yes. So thank you. That was just wonderful. And it was an enjoyable hour and a half. Very, very informative. We've got lovely comments from many people. The session has been recorded, so it will be up on our YouTube channel for those who could not join to also revisit and see this, and we will share that actively on our social media as well. Over to Kelly or Rita.
I think Rita will be doing the vote of thanks.
Yes, so I'll be doing the vote of thanks. My video has been stopped by the.
You can put on the video.
Yeah, it was stopped by the host.
Okay, maybe you go on. There you are.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you all for joining us today in this insightful webinar, as it has been enriching experience, and we all are grateful for your active participation. A heartfelt appreciation goes to our distinguished speakers and for sharing their expertise and valuable insights. Their knowledge has been truly inspiring and will undoubtedly leave a last impact. We also extend our gratitude. Sorry. We also extend our gratitude to all the attendees who took time to be with us today. Your engagement and thoughtful questions added immense value to our discussion. Lastly, we express our sincere thanks to the organizing team and technical crew for their dedicated efforts in making this event a success. As we conclude, we hope you leave with newfound knowledge and ideas to apply in your respective fields. Let's stay connected and continue to learn and grow together. Thank you all once again and have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So Kelly, that's a lovely note to end on. And thank you, Namita, so much.
Thank you, Doc.
And thanks, Yogendra Savita.
Thank you.
We'll,
Thank you.
we'll,
Thank you for this
we'll
opportunity.
meet offline soon.
Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
We should.
Very
Okay.
good.
yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.